Without evidence, without evidence, without evidence, the media likes to repeat the same things because they read it from each other. And I mean, for the most part, the national level media, but there are some local level journalists who are part of the same community. And what they do is they repeat the same things over and over again that they hear each other say to enforce a narrative. It's really, really annoying. So what I'm talking about is Florida and the election kerfluffle. Obviously, you click the video, you know what the gist of the video is about. And they keep saying that, people without evidence are claiming something is amiss. Without evidence. Okay, first of all, I have this story that I want to go through from Tim Canova, who ran as a Democrat, who was favored by left-wing activists to replace Debbie Wasserman Schultz in Congress. He lost. He filed a lawsuit saying he wanted to check all the ballots. Snipes in Broward County illegally destroyed them, according to the suit. This is evidence. Tim Canova's story is evidence something weird goes on in Broward County. But how about this from the Miami Herald? Whoops. Brenda Snipes' office mixed bad provisional ballots with good ones. Evidence! Yes, there absolutely is evidence that something really messed up is going on. We saw a video from Tim Canova, okay, where people are loading bags in some kind of box truck. The box truck was then seen pulling up to the Broward County elections, building. There's protests outside. Something weird is going on. Seriously. Apparently now I think the results are all in, but Rick Scott still wins. But it's within such a close margin, for like 0.2, that they're going to do they are going to do a recount. But let's read. The reason I want to focus specifically on Tim Canova is because he is the guy who is on the left saying, hey, something troubling is going on. And you can't dismiss the guy because the far left, like not even necessarily the far left, but left-wing activists were like, this is the dude. He was part of like Bernie progressive wave. Now, the entire story about Florida is really, really complex. So let's just read what Tim Canova had to say. He wrote this op-ed in the Sun Sentinel. I warned Governor Scott about Broward's election swamp. For 2 years, I have been warning that the Broward Supervisor of Elections office is a swamp of corruption. I have been urging Governor Rick Scott to fire Supervisor Brenda Snipes clean out of the office and start criminal investigations. I'm sure Governor Scott now wishes he had heeded those warnings. In 2016, I took a leave of absence for Nova Southeast University, where I am a tenured law professor, to run for Congress in a Democratic primary against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. After I lost by about 13 percentage points, I sought to inspect the ballots to verify the vote, as permitted under Florida's public records law. Unfortunately, Snipes stonewalled my requests for months, and I was forced to file a lawsuit in mid-2017. Early this year, Snipes admitted in a sworn videotaped deposition that she had destroyed all the paper ballots. Why? Why? Why did she destroy them? Why is this being reported in mainstream sources? Why is the head of elections destroying ballots? Seriously, this is bipartisan, okay? Yeah, obviously there's a lot of Democrats who are like, oh, nothing's going on. They're just counting votes because they want to win. But when you have Tim Canova, you got to get behind this guy. This is what pisses me off about the Democrats. Like, you can't support this guy and tell people he is like a replacement for Bernie, or I'm sorry, he's like part of the Bernie wave. He's a replacement for Wasserman Schultz. And then when he says, guys, there's fraud happening, something is going on, you ignore it. You say it's part of the conspiracy theory. There's no evidence. No, this is the guy to listen to, because this is the guy who's not a Republican. He says, several months later, the Florida Circuit Court granted me summary judgment and found that Snipes had violated numerous state and federal statutes, including some punishable as felonies with up to 5 years in prison. Snipes has claimed there was no harm to the public because we could inspect the digital scanned images of the ballots. But there's no way to inspect the software of the electronic voting machines that create those scanned ballot images. The software is proprietary. The private property of the software vendors hired by the supervisor. Why would anyone run for office or even vote while we have this awful system of black box voting with electronic voting machines that are inherently susceptible to hacking and software manipulation? I've come to believe the only way to have fair elections is to move to a system of 100% hand-marked paper ballots that are counted by hand in public by nonpartisan and transpartisan teams of citizens. Both before and after the court ruled against Snipes, I warned that if she were kept in office, there would be more official misconduct in elections. None of our law enforcement agencies, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the Florida Attorney General, or the U.S. Attorney for South Florida, were interested in starting criminal investigations. After Democratic Party leaders failed to support any investigation, I decided to leave the party and run as a no-party affiliation independent candidate. I was very clear that I did not expect a fair election and that Snipes would likely try to punish me by rigging the election again. But I wanted to use the campaign to expose as much of the corruption in our elections as possible. My recent campaign as an independent caught fire in the final weeks. We saw an upsurge in support when a Republican news outlet reported on a Republican poll that showed us in a dead heat with Wasserman Schultz and the Republican candidate far behind. In early voting, we saw an upsurge of new voters, especially young voters who don't normally participate in midterm elections. Hundreds of volunteers stepped up. Canvassers were knocking on 5,000 doors a day by the end. And we had volunteers at almost every early voting site and election day site where we witnessed a steady stream of voters from across the political spectrum breaking our way. On election night, Snipes' office reported that I had received less than 5% of the vote. A vote tally so low, it's absolutely ludicrous. Somehow, we're supposed to believe that I got half the number of votes in a general election than I received in a closed primary, and at a time when my name recognition was so much higher than 2 years ago. Today, everyone is acutely aware of the problem of Snipes' office. Both parties in Florida are responsible for this election nightmare. Neither was willing to stand up for the rule of law. Democrats took no heed when Snipes was photographed campaigning with Wasserman Schultz barely a week before the recent election. They should not be surprised that Republicans now suspect a rigged election. And perhaps the Republicans could have gotten off their asses and dealt with this when there was an issue that a Democrat was facing. But this is one of the biggest problems of partisanship, and it's an oh-so-glorious bite in the ass to the Republicans in Florida. Yep, you heard me right. If Rick Scott took Tim Canova seriously, we wouldn't be in this mess, and he would have had a clean victory. The same thing for DeSantis. But when Tim Canova said something is wrong, and we know for a fact that Snipes destroyed ballots, she destroyed ballots. It's in the Sun Sentinel. A court ruled she illegally destroyed them. This is not up for debate. This is not a conspiracy theory. And if when he came, you know what I think happened? I think he was running for Congress against Wasserman Schultz. He went to the Republicans and said, hey guys, help me out with this. They were probably like, I don't care about the Democrats, man. We don't care what the Democrats are doing. Now look, that's just my opinion. Maybe he did want to do something, maybe he didn't. But the point is, if they took care of this 2 years ago, a year ago, we would not be seeing this now. And like Tim Canova says, I am sure they regret not taking action when they could have. Because now you've got the Democrats saying, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. They're making these claims without evidence. Without evidence? Your own dude who ran in the primary for the Democrats is saying this is going on. How can you ignore this? He says, unfortunately, nobody seems to care about election rigging until it happens to them. Bingo. But this problem is bigger than any candidate. It should concern all of us as Americans. Sadly, I no longer trust any election result reported in Broward County. There needs to be an investigation of every election that's taken place here. I call on Governor Scott to do what he should have done months ago. Immediately fire Brenda Snipes and replace her with someone with integrity who is more interested in fair elections than in favoring particular candidates or parties. They say Tim Canova is a professor of law and public finance at Nova Southeastern University in Davie, Fort Lauderdale. You know what's really funny about this? The Democrats are saying there's no evidence. Oh, okay. You realize what's going on in Broward County isn't just bad for Republicans, right? It's also bad for Democrats. And no, I'm not playing some like it's the American way being threatened here. I'm literally saying, think about this. What if there actually are votes that would swing the Florida election for Bill Nelson and for Andrew Gillum, but because Broward is so goddamn incompetent, they didn't actually count those votes and other Republicans won? That should piss you off, Democrats. What if what they're saying is true? Like, let's imagine two scenarios. There's no fraud, it's just incompetence. What that means is there are a ton of votes that aren't being counted that would actually help Gillum and Nelson. And the Democrats could actually lose because you refuse to deal with this, Democrats. Now let's think about the other scenario. Brenda Snipes is actually forging votes. I don't know if that's true, I'm just saying something is strange as afoot. Because she was supposed to say how many votes they had, something like a half an hour after the polls closed. She didn't do it. She didn't comply with a court order last night, and apparently not applying with didn't comply with a court order today. Though now I believe the vote totals are in, and they're going to do a recount. The point is, there's two possibilities: she's committing fraud or she isn't. If she isn't committing fraud, that means those Democratic votes are being improperly counted, and it means that they might nullify some votes that could have given the Democrats the win. Democrats, where are you? You should be pissed about this. She may have just cost you the election. And to the people on the right, she destroyed ballots with Tim Canova. She might actually be doing something nefarious to try and stop the Republicans from winning. The point is, conspiracies, we don't need them. We don't need them. We have Sun Sentinel reporting. We have Tim Canova saying that a court ruled, a Florida Circuit Court summary judgment, Snipes had violated numerous laws by destroying ballots. It happened. If you're a Democrat or Republican, you should see this as a problem because they're going to cost either one of you the race, and we don't know. That's the problem. We just don't know. Brenda Snipes needs to get out of there. Plain and simple. And you know what? I think because the vote was called for the Republicans, the Democrats are just, hey man, it must be a conspiracy. This is normal because they're hoping they might win. But what they're not realizing is they might have actually won in the first place. If they think, here's what's interesting. If they think that Brenda Snipes is incompetent, they should be calling for her resignation because she cost them the election. If they think she's actually trying to forge things to stop the Republicans, they'd probably be happy with what she's doing, which is kind of weird, right? You would imagine that they'd be saying, dude, Brenda, we were supposed to win and you screwed this up. But they're not saying that. Why not? Seriously, why not? I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Honestly, I don't necessarily think that Brenda Snipes is either forging anything or I don't know what she's doing. What I do know, and I don't like to make assumptions, is that from the Sun Sentinel, Florida Circuit Court granted a summary judgment, found that Snipes had violated numerous laws. Some are felonies with punishable up to 5 years in prison. Okay? She did that. She did that. She did that. Okay? End of story. So you want to talk about evidence? There's your evidence. Something needs to be done about this, and I am with Tim Canova. Anyway, stick around. I got a couple more videos coming up in just a few minutes.